before I started. Acknowledgement of participation has been on the mind recently. It's what's at the tip of the tongue. It's what really want to be given out as pieces of meme mentality, and what the acknowledgement represents, that being participation is akin to epiphany itself, but it's an ongoing epiphany. An epiphany is characterized by a model, by a central model, because it's all inclusive. It's all inclusive of the things that it pesters, perplexes, confuses, perturbs man's continuance. His continuance is in a fluctuating state. Many other things upon the channel will represent that thought. But this now is an extra layer, or sideways, or appendage, or attachment, and a continuous attachment. These and videos would be that is surround one central theme, and as the quantity of content gains critical mass, it will become more and more evident what exactly is undergoing distillation. What's the topic? What's the picture that's under distillation? The acknowledgement of participation, it comes with a model. It represents. It signifies a sentence. Ultimately, expressions are represented vocally with with sound molecules in the air molecules and sound waves and auditory apparatuses, but in this process, what is being transmitted is a thing of thought. It is thought itself. It's the language of thoughts that precedes culture, that precedes one's own language, that precedes what is it the commenter is expressing. It's the language of thought that precedes that. And this model that is a derivation of acknowledging one's participation, this model is made of thought material, and it expresses itself on still making a leap that the signifiers here, the players and factors and figures that is being spoken of or seen, and maneuvering still that there is a clear view on what it means, what the meaning is portraying, and it's made of thought material. And what it represents is that acknowledgement that one is part of participation, and what participation means, and what presents itself as an opportunity. It's an opportunity. It's presented, it's open, it's anybody's game. The argument that keeps man in his retardated state, say that not under the connotation that is generally assumed with it, but using it as a technical definition of regression when he's due for update, in procrastination when he's due for update. That turning on with this acknowledgement of participation and how wondrous an opportunity is, that it won't be disparaged or it won't be wasted on certain, once again, actual occasions and action potential. It has to surround it as well, because all things are on and around and surrounded and are about this one topic. So I expect fractality and overlap in each channel. Though it possesses a unique factor, it also shares a commonality, and this commonality is the central theme that will once again be expressed once there's more content to depict its sections, fractions. We'll riff off a line here from the paper. Systematic construction of an all-encompassing totality of framing context that incorporates the process of reality through the constellation of history, nature, the zeitgeist, and man. By the action of reflection, apperception of the interconnected, intersecting patterns of formative elements of events and the causes of an action with the vast web of influences leading up to the particular deed on a particular date, propelled by interest, temperament to venture for ideas coming into reality with intelligibility, real and waiting to be realized, then actualized in the procedure of becoming for temporary beholders. Homo erectus and Homo neanderthals needed to precede Christ. They were not anatomically and neuroanatomically up to par with the innate receptivity needed to resonate with the message, and this biosocial, psycho, neurophysiological impairment is not lacking in modern times. Here is a quarter way into the 21st century. The meme appears in its nascent state. This meme of acknowledging participation, the acknowledgement, the epiphany that comes with acknowledging that one is participating. It's not lacking in modern times. Here is a quarter way into the 21st century. The meme appears in its nascent state of permeation. God intermixed, or the God figure, the God archetype, and the archetype is intermixed, similarly as his psyche is free-ranging. The others are not free-ranging. So by nature of his range, he must intermix. It could be seen as he's intermixing towards the transcendent in the diagrammic representation, this three-dimension X, Y, and Z axis, his transcendent relationship to divinity, his Y, or rather horizontal intergenerational transmission with his social circle, his family, his network, his community, his group, and relationship with his parent, close kin, very close kin, and close enough kin that his center is his self, intermixed with the sapiens due to the vectors of transmission. Vectors was just described. Man's relationship is not only with the vertical and horizontal, but also with the transcendent. Man thinks, God knows, and God knows what man thinks. Let us remake man and continue to do so until he is in our image and likeness. Aforementioned descent with modification by paradigmatic substitution in the genotype, in his paradigmatic substitution in his nucleotide sequences, or fall for redemption or transformation, recapitulating the genealogy of morals, rationality, morality, and maturity. Phylogeny recapitulates ontology. Ontology recapitulates philology. Once the collective condensing understanding has assimilated, accommodated, and then reverse their agenda to match where history is headed, the feature specific aspects of man's movement, traversal. Well, aforementioned, being that it's a paper and the context is sparse. Surprise then if few set the agenda for billions of people, sending culturally conditioned citizens to exotic countries to kill their inhabitants, as a friend would describe it. He's giving basic training, he's giving ammunition, he's giving a speech, he's giving a promise of rank, he's financially rewarded. If man sells his time, it's usually in trade of purchasing power, and he's rewarded on a return, given how many bodies he bags, what was some ratio, some quantification of his performance, and he's rewarded in that respect. Surprised then that Billion set the agenda for so many different people, and that he can be sent by the millions to his death in the promise, in this rhetorical motivation of patrioticism. He doesn't consider himself a cosmopolitan, a citizen of the cosmos, but individual property states that this is X and that's Y, and X and Y are to either communicate under certain restraints, and he considered himself still in this manner, speaking on the maturity aspect. He's being sent by the millions, by the thousands to his death, but yet he cannot be called by the millions and thousands to Eden. Man is of a certain, spoken of earlier, procrastination, retardation. He considers himself, well, he doesn't consider himself quite accurately what is it he's capable of. He's locked from certain portions of thinking, and they only appear later on, and it's inescapable. He doesn't have a certain clearance to consciousness until he makes a certain move through time. So he now has a certain clearance. He's close enough to the end of history to see the texture of this phase transition. He's close enough to be able to see the texture of this phase transition. But he's such a thing that he procrastinates and he retardates, and he's due for update. Everything that can go wrong before things get right will go wrong. Man is of the forms. He's of the formative elements. So he carries on in the arena similarly as orangutan or a caterpillar exerts its agency, but he exerts it to a different caliber once again because X, Y, blah, blah, blah. He is one of them. He's of the forms. And because he's of the forms, he has to undergo certain... Everything that can go wrong before things get right will go wrong. That still holds the connection. That he has to go, because he's of the forms, he's asked to undergo this process, and this is what his process is in his history. He's effervescent, to say that he's expelling energy. He's an actual potential, and his where attention goes, energy follows, and attention is a moral factor. Attention is many of the other things that are not immediately resonant or not high resolution immediate also tend to recirculate in these discourses, obscure discourses. Because if such a thing, he has to undergo these certain occasions. He has to undergo these certain occasions, and he calls them what he calls them, and he gives meaning to them. It's not only the event that man is a part of, but the meaning he gives those events. His formative times and what he has to do and what happens in his period as he's effervescent. He has a live chart, and this information is not available out in the world, meaning it's not out in the world, meaning that it's not available in the contrast. In the diagram, there is the description of what exists in the mind only, what exists in the mind and in life world, in the empirical life world, that all this down to the deeper motor movements are, and where this technology is affecting, is leading this cause is leading to an effect. He contrasts there. There are only the things that only exist in the mind. There are things that exist in the mind and in the world, and there are things that does not exist in the world and does not exist in the mind. Those are the unknowns. This work, this life data, it exists in the mind as yet. It exists with the respectability of reason, but because it has to undergo, it's one of the few things that lends itself to articulation, and it lends itself also to certain constraints that it wasn't articulable at certain, it was ineffable at another time, and in this present moment it's articulable. It does not lend itself. There are certain things that do not lend themselves at certain times because there is the delay of their impact. he has to undergo these certain things, and he continues after he undergoes these things. I expectation that historical teleology means the reverberation of eschatology. It's descent with modification. After all, the end of the precipitating paradigms are the beginning of the novel regime. Yes, precipitate novelty, and speaking again on emergence. What's happening, the obstacling, delaying is to be expected, and there is no opponent, rather obstacle processing to make the case of nature's propensity for a narrative. Well, it's not technically nature propensity for a narrative, but it can be seen as that in this iridescence from point of view upon iridescence. It can be seen as that nature propensity for a narrative, but the narrative are consequences of certain laws. It's not chasing after the narrative that is upon byproducts and byproducts and byproducts of byproducts. Building institution within institution is one of the reasons that things cannot be easily retrogressively unpacked into each other, because the network intersplicing is convoluted. But of course, it's not convoluted entirely, that there is not a saving grace, there is not an outlet to section or compartmentalize these different figures under the subject of description, undergoing description. But it also exists that the consequence of man's effervescence do translate into his history, because they become crystallized. But he's crystallized, but at the very spurs where the sparks of present is visible, where the sparks of the presence of is visible. What precedes it is the future uncrystallized potential. But what uncrystallized potential is still life world, is still the 3 feet tall, 4 feet tall, 5 feet tall, or however we could describe his or her height, and the life form's height, or the phenotypic characteristics, their hairstyle, their race, their ethnicity. Well, not those other things, but you can describe his phenotypes and describe his race and ethnicity and his epigenetics and the repository of his accumulation so far. But he exists over in life world, where he effervesces, and so when he's going into the future, it's still him imagine him in the skeletal form that you'll find at your local anatomist office, and imagine still that form upon the world, once again leaving copies of his genes, but it's that form in the present moment with the sparks and the crystallization of the past and the uncrystallized, unconsolidated potential of the future. It's still that figure from the anatomist office put upon this planet that is orbiting around his solar aid. It's still all those figures that's moving, and you can imagine him down in his 4-wheel drive vehicle, his air conditioned, his leather seats, his limited slip differential. He goes all the way down in everything that he does, and they're all moving parts entirely. Upon his car, upon his automobile, it's an engine block with internal combustion at play, and pistons and moving at pace unapprehended by the user in average cases. And he's moving with his transmission and planetary gear system, his torque converter, and everything that can be named of two numerous dimension. Everything that can be described there, added to everything that can be described in the life form, from his neurotransmitters to his binding process, to his blood sugar levels, to his emotional state, in how is his his stress level, his cortical level, is he in is his symptomatic nervous system energized, everything that can be described about him, down to his red blood cell at that particular moment, added to what's outside him, is describable. It's describable, and then added to everything else that can be added to him. So down, as far as apprehension goes, there is explanation of what is going on at all times. There exists that, but in most cases you have to have a room surrounded by certain experts to be able to explain things in this way. But there's a common way to also apprehend. This is those who are lovers of, or those who are pursuers of wonder, or inquirers into many things, and describing it this way as it's not it is what, in fact, just what it is. It is curiosity that follows it, a depth to know, and that is not the path the tangent is going through. The tangent tree does not sit in the position of describing curiosity in that line. It is considering what man is, if you describe in him, what happens around him, to only use the happenings to be the descriptive tool. That there exists that tier, that layer of explanation before he gets to the superstitious, before he gets to the rigorous scientific. There is the individual, there's an individual review of what existence holds, and this individual review itself then must share have a relationship, given that they each share something in common, in that they share themselves in reality. To still speak on man and his happening and how far he goes, and what most importantly, the acknowledgement of participation. The acknowledgement of participation is the key central tenet there. Maybe it might be perhaps over or under representing some aspect of the detailing to some audience is what is prompted, but in this leap of faith will reformulate it in other ways. That it starts first that man is a human, before he gets to anything else, and it's from that perspective, gathering, aggregating the facts and sitting before them as a child is where the model begins to gestate. The model gestates simply by trying to garner the most objective view, think empathetically. It's with empathy, putting oneself in another's shoes, that it gets started. It's sitting before the models just as an objective subject. As far as objection can go, that means getting out of one's own way and leaving. It's difficult to say leaving because that's not operative. That's not operative word, although it's understood in normal context. But in the situation, to leave means getting rid of fallacies as much as one can, calling oneself under BS as much as one can, taking hold of one's self-destructive behavior as much as one can. These are the things of leaving. That these things and confirmation biases and all the things that ruffle in this category are all of a certain category. And in the movement from one set of action to another, it creates a different outlook. It has to create a different thought. It will change the way you see the world. The things you will see in the world will change, and if you change the way you see the world will redisclose itself to you. But changing and this such happening, if you're considering as if free will are possible, or you only before getting to the line of free will, not only possible but always possible, regardless of not if one is expecting their outlook to be inextricably linked to their consequencing, meaning their review of life, meaning their history. That the outlook is just one component. That one could be once again in their familiar language, that not all those who say Lord, Lord will enter the kingdom of heaven. a declarative statement. It's not all, but how are you? Where's the spectrum of all those who are saying it is down that actions speak louder than words? So even those in actions that also say, Lord, but will enter the kingdom of heaven, but actions itself represents a promissory link or tethered into the state. That is with actions that this game is exchanged. Is with action potential and exertions of agency, and the quality of these exertions of agency that determines if one appears on anybody's radar as expendable agent. It's with those exertions that everyone and anyone is linking each other. They are sizing each other up in their dominance dispute with the way they each exerts their agency, how witty they are, how confrontational they are, what tune they pick, what gesture they have, what mannerism they have. Humans themselves are quantifiable, and quantifying them enough using as a substitute for the mark in everything that is the mark as a tautology, then that it just to say if anything done right, and then right represents itself from things that are opposed to not right. The very first paragraph in the paper is supporting such a statement. Correction is a thing because incorrection is a thing, and that's another that man has to ruffle with. He has many other things to ruffle with, you would say, but that's definitely one thing he has to ruffle with, that there are incorrections and there are corrections. So he's not a perfect agent. His agency is not of that magnitude, but it could be abstracted as one, perhaps in some future state or in the or in fantasy. He has correction and he has incorrection, and that's what it means by enough. That being comprehended enough can gain claim of the hearts of man, that humans will have little to say, though there are the effects of this too, because humans themselves they despise the ideal, but they have a certain let's rather crush, for lack of a better word, they have a crush on admiration that the humans cannot help themselves when they see an action when they see an action exertion that displays wisdom. Wisdom is a display, the correct application of one's different procedural, perspectual, participatory knowledge. The correct application of this various knowledge form is the result of wisdom. So the humans cannot help themselves but be biased to is one of what gives what's an open door, open door for the model or for the message itself to take greater root. That man is biased towards what he admires. He immediately contrasts it with also what he's capable of. So in these cases where one can do and experiment by exerting their agency in these certain ways and expecting a certain result as a response of. Granted that there are in some cases that life is such a way, given this lottery dispersal, his fellow co-characters are not always in similar situations as he can be, and putting out a blanket statement of do X, Y, and Z regardless of any other way that you could discriminate amongst yourself will always lead to this similar desired result. But what works and what must always work is what has always worked in the past of a certain proposition. And this proposition is carrying out this certain series of actions and exertions upon the world, and it will be guaranteed to return in a belief in this proposition. And here is now how it must also link over, that one does not abandon their religious predispositions or dispositions when they move on to the thinking that surrounds the Gospel of Eden. In fact, it is still the case that it should have been expected. It should always be woven into the message, into the inspiration, that there exists this thing that comes, but you will not know what it is because your consciousness is blocked, is locked from certain thoughts. Consciousness there is very broad world. It means something understood by direct experience, by meaning, but also reiterating that it is blocked from certain thoughts. It does not immediately become available to contemplators what it is their blind spots are. It's later on in doing discourse with another, perhaps an enlightener or a stimulator, that they say, aha, I didn't think of this way, I have not seen this way. And that's a very technically gifted sentence, because it exactly proposes what he should then resume into his ontology once again, that, oh, yours is such a being that does not immediately have grasp of certain things, and there is an inverse relationship between the things that they see and they are availed of versus the things that they are blind to, and these things they are blind to should be their predominant priority. This direction, remedying their ignorance as fast as possible, as quick as possible, because what remedying one's ignorance means is more displays of wisdom, and what more displays of wisdom means more of one's actions are giving them consequences they desire, and what more of one's action giving them the consequence of what the desire means is that they are not expelling more energy than is necessary to solve the task at hand. That energy is vital. His exertions is energy, and what returns to him as the cost of this energy determines how much energy he then spends to either troubleshoot this issue or not. So he, in the fact that he understands the chain that follows his actions, and he understands it to some respectability, then in that sense he's saving himself. What remedying his consequences, he is saving oneself. Their thoughts are supposed to die instead of them. Ultimately, as one exerts them agency, there are moments, perhaps precariously placing the bottle at the very edge of the corner, and giving that it has the qualities to create travesty in the midst, and means that one thought of perhaps the precautionary preemptive thought did not save them. And you can consider why this is valuable, because those who did not were not influenced by this prompt, by this provoking prompt, and it's a provoking rather but not inhibiting prompt, that perhaps you shouldn't do it that way. It's the logos, it's what the Christ archetype represent. It has to do with remedying one's ignorance, keeping oneself safe, and as they continue to do so in keeping themselves safe, they have less bumps and bruises through their scar pattern of expulsion. Participation is easier, but expulsion, meaning that something is turned on, and really using the foundational thought as an alleyway, that it is something is turned on, that is means the acknowledgement of participation. You're here in awareness in contemporary human existence, and it comes with a certain X, and this X is all the things that is surrounding here and about the Gospel of Eden. He surely begins where his mind is not discovered, but he begins before death, and that space is represented by the infinity symbol, that, or rather a question mark, but it's a question. It's not evident. Who knows exactly the qualities of this before environment, before birth environment, and he goes through the recapitulations of ontology, meaning he has epistemic. He goes through the ups and downs of epistemological ignorance once again, that he has to understand how to exert his agency appropriately. And then he does this, each man having his the war is a stage, each man having his entrance and exit, and then he has his exit. It is the after death environment. And once again, the after death environment is represented by a question mark. It's not yet understood well, but still it's definitely being pursued, what lies in that, in both environment. But it's clear what lies in this environment. There's something on, this is the happening contemporary human existence. An expression of historical teleology means the reverberation of eschatology in descent. To not continue any further, that the agree upon half-hour mark, it's not even a half-hour mark, has been passed, so then it should be apt to discontinue the conversation.